And if you don't want to say it, just go firm. And thank you for coming. The reason we're having these meetings is that we are kicking off a master plan to look at flooding across basically all of the town of Fairfield, the riverine floods, the coast floods, our underpasses floods, our downtown floods. And we have done over the years, probably 20+ studies on various parts of the town. But very few of those have actually come to fruition. And some of them are in process, like the Brewster River, things in process, wastewater treatment plant, we actually did do, which is really critical because you really don't want your wastewater going into the sound. So we have done some of our studies, but others have this sort of language that we've never really pulled them all together into a holistic look at what is it that our town needs to decide whether we want to fund or not based upon flooding. And I'm gonna be really honest, we're not gonna fund everything. We can't. Army Corps of Engineers did a very big analysis, and they only just looked at the coast, and it was $547 million to protect our town. And that's just something I don't think we want our taxpayers to pay, nor do we need it. But we can do things that are a little less than that make sense, that make financial sense, and that actually stop flooding for our town. And that's the objective here. The objective is really to pull all those studies together. We hired a consultant who's going to really evaluate all those studies. Well, I'm not going to steal David's stuff. He's going to go through it all.
I'm not the consultant though that she's talking about, so.
The reason having you guys all here today is because we really want the residents of the town to be part of this process. We want to hear your ideas. We want to know if you guys have things you want us to look at. So you will see that you have little sticky notes and pens on your table. So if there's something that you think, gosh, I wish the town would look at, boom, or I wish they would do this. And I can't promise we're gonna do all of them because we have a regulatory environment with our Connecticut deeds that basically says you can't put walls up, you can't put hard structures up. So, but we'll at least look at them, we'll evaluate them and we'll say, these are people who live with the flooding, they know where the water comes, they're living with it every day. And there's good ideas out there that we may not be aware of. So that's the objective here, is to have people be able to share your thoughts. We'll take them back, we'll evaluate them, we'll tell you if we can do them or if we can't, but at least we will have heard you. And that's why we're having you here today. So we're gonna have a series of public meetings as this process goes along. This is the first one. We just kicked this project off this month. So we just had our kickoff consultants, but we're just at the very beginning. We're gonna be doing a series of these public meetings. So there'll be a chance for us to share as we go along and you can have your input at each step of the way. So the process today, Bill unfortunately was going to do a kickoff and he called me 10 minutes before the meeting and said that he had a family medical emergency, so he wants to give his apologies to you all. He does care a lot about this. He's been a huge champion of this. And I think that's really important to have the town 100% behind doing this evaluation. Before we kick off, I'd like to do a couple of things. I'd like to acknowledge some of the flood and erosion control people who are in the audience today. If you could stand up. And you guys have any questions? Here are some people you can ask. It's not just me, although I'm happy to answer any questions. Emmeline is our CRS floodplain manager for the town. She is an expert at this as well. And Wendy is our project manager. So again, these are all people you can go to if you have any questions. But please also, if you have questions as this process goes, go to the town website and go to the Flood and Erosion Control Board site. And there's a place where you can contact the board. So if you think of things afterwards, give us your ideas. This is about participation. We really want to hear your ideas. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Murphy, who is one of our core team members.
Thanks, Becky. And I just want to let everybody know that there are people that are dialed in via Zoom. So if you're sitting here in the room and you see some names, that's who's in the meeting virtually. And for those who are dialed in to Zoom, we've got an audience of people in the room. All of you, just let you know we're recording this presentation, but I think it's probably going to pick up only the people at the front of the room. So it's sort of a disclosure. You may be, Emmeline, it's not the room Zoom, it's yeah. So if you say something, you may be picked up, you may not be. If you want to be part of the recording, I would say maybe come to the front, but we'll get there towards the end. Let me just minimize the screen. There's snacks in the back, so please feel free to take something. Here's Bill Hurley, we'll let him in. There's 2 sign-in sheets. Again, one is for this building, it stays here so they know who has used the room, and one is for the board to take back and know who attended this meeting. My name is David Murphy. I'm not the consultant working on this master plan. So we have a separate small contract with the town to kind of help out with things just like this. And I think that's nice because you can say whatever you want to me and it's not going to be something that I'm going to, have to worry about how I incorporate it. I'm going to record it on this and we're going to give it to that consultant and you're going to participate in those meetings as well. But this is your chance to get it all on the table early on. What do you guys think of this logo, right? We're trying to think of something that matches the town colors. The blue and green on the website, too silly, it's fine, whatever. We got to brand everything these days, right? Okay. So we're just going to get right into it. So the agenda for tonight, go through the objectives for this planning process and for this session right now. We're going to recognize the challenge, flooding and erosion, and how it's occurring and where it's occurring. I'm assuming that you're all arriving with some knowledge. This is not a whole exposition on what causes flooding, right? That's going to happen later on in the planning process. We're going to do some speed dating through all the work the town's done over the past 10, 15 years. And I think it's going to seem redundant to a lot of you because if you've worked on these planning processes in the past, you're going to see the slide and you might feel frustrated. That's okay. We want to get it all on the table tonight so that the consultant who starts this master plan will have all that information. We'll end with a quick view of the schedule, talk about what the outcomes of this will be, and then I'll tell you what your homework is, and then we'll end with an open discussion. I'll go over there and I'll write things on the pad with Sharpies so we get it all out in the open. So big question here, why conduct more planning? You've been planning for a long time, it feels like, right? For decades. Well, a big part of the town is in a flood zone or not in a flood zone and still experiences flooding. So this is causing disruptions, it's causing loss of property, it's impacting public health and safety, it's impacting our first responders, what they have to do. So, enough is enough, right? It's time to put together this flood and erosion resiliency master plan to help weave everything together that's been done already and set what's going to happen next. So key questions to answer during this planning process that's starting tonight or this month is what's been happening, what flooding has already occurred, what were the damages, and then what has the town done to recover from those events. But then going forward, are conditions changing? Is flooding getting worse? And even if it's not getting worse, the expenses to pick up the pieces are going to keep increasing, right? So we need to look ahead a little bit as part of this plan. So in this meeting, we're looking to collect your thoughts. And it's, again, going to seem frustrating if you've been involved with planning processes in Fairfield in the past and you're wondering what's going on. But just remember that tonight is now. This is a key moment in time. Everything before tonight, you've helped out with, right? But going forward, we want to get, I know, see some sad faces, but this is, just think about tonight as an important night, more important than all those other ones. We're going to put it all together, right? So we're going to recognize the challenge first. I got a couple slides about flooding. So what kinds of flooding are occurring in Fairfield? All of them, all the kinds of flooding. You have coastal flooding, riverine flooding, the underpasses flood. You have flooding that's caused by severe precipitation combined with coastal flooding. You have flooding caused by king tides. At some of the underpasses, there's actually a risk of coastal flooding and riverine flooding and drainage flooding all happening at the same time. Thankfully, that hasn't really occurred, but it can happen. So again, all the flooding that can happen is happening in Fairfield. These are just some quick definitions. We're not going to need them tonight. Hazard mitigation, that's how you reduce losses from flooding. Climate adaptation is hazard mitigation looking ahead. How do we reduce losses in the future? And then resiliency is what we do to prepare for, withstand the flood, recover from, and adapt. Or did you know? So flooding is more than a third of all hazard losses in Fairfield. That's the last bullet I'm reading. I'm skipping to the end. So it's a big draw on resources. It's the biggest natural hazard that causes losses in the town. So that means, what are the other things that could be happening? So wind damage, right? Trees down on roads, trees down on cars and houses. But flooding is a big part of that total loss. Many flood policies in forests in Fairfield. Not everybody has flood insurance. So there are losses that are occurring that aren't even recorded by the National Flood Insurance Program. So what do we currently understand? So these severe precipitation events are becoming, we believe, more frequent. Not the total amount per year, although that's also increasing, but the severity of those intense events. Also, we've got some sea level rise going on. The state has said that we should plan for about 2 feet by 2050. That's not a projection, that's a planning figure, right? Those are two different things. A projection has some uncertainty in it, but the planning figure is what the state says we should plan for. Coastal storms appear to be becoming more frequent, or at least the damage is sort of worse than it was in the past. And that cost to clean up that just kind of drags us down is increasing every year. So this master plan, what do we want to know going forward? We want to quantify the impacts associated with not doing anything. So if we've done all these studies and we don't implement them, what is the cost, right? That's a number that we need to know. And then we need some guidance on what can be permitted and authorized going forward. So this plan will attempt to tackle both of those questions. So solutions have been identified over the past few decades. They're believed to be costly. We've got some figures attached to some of them. They don't all have cost estimates, but the guess is that they'll be more than the resources that we have at the present time to pay for them. So looking ahead, which ones are most urgent to implement? How do we sort this all out? So here are the goals for this new master plan starting tonight. So develop that prioritized list of flood mitigation approaches with costs for permanent and temporary, in other words, deployable solutions. So permanent would be elevating a house or building a flood wall. We do it and it's fixed in place. Temporary could be a flood barrier that we deploy right before a flood, or a gate that goes down in front of an underpass. So permanent and temporary solutions townwide. This isn't just a coastal plan. Wherever flood losses have occurred or where we think risks are unacceptable. Also, this plan will sort of lay out how to work with different town boards and commissions and departments to make sure that solutions end up in the capital improvement plan. And then position the town for grants when they come back, and they will, whether it's state or federal or other kinds. We've got someone in the waiting room. Let me let them in. All right. So with that, I'm going to take a deep breath. Or I'm going to. We're going to go through some of the work that's been done, some of the good work that's been done over the past couple decades. And again, if you've been involved, feel some sense of pride, right? Don't feel frustrated. I'm going to try to turn this around tonight. Maybe you were involved in some of the meetings that occurred for some of these projects. Maybe you feel like nothing's been done since it happened, but it's now time to weave it all together. So if you see something on the board up on the screen that you've seen before, don't dismay. It's time to pull everything back up and honor it tonight and get it into this plan. You guys know what this picture is, right? Across the street. Okay, the flood protection system for this wastewater treatment plant. So that's the steel sheet pile wall that is meant to reduce flood risk. All right, so early efforts. Back in the 1950s and 60s in the state, we took a lot of time to build flood protection systems and nourish beaches and build jetties and groins. So a lot was done back in the 60s in Fairfield and along the whole shoreline. There was something called a shore area plan. And I won't read all the bullets, but you can see on the left-hand side some of the things that were recommended as part of that. So that's coastal, right? On the right-hand side, we have some of the earlier Rooster River studies. So those date back to probably the late 80s, and then published in 1990. And then there was an update in 2002. And some of the things that were recommended over time, so channel improvements, bridge removal, sediment removal, all the things that we still kind of talk about. But those were some of the earlier studies that we conducted for the Rooster River. I didn't say it yet, so I'll say it now. You'll see the slides now have this timeline across the top, and there's a kind of a green icon. It'll move across. It was a brilliant idea until I just realized in Zoom it's not, because you're missing some years in the middle. So just in the next meeting, we'll put that on the bottom. But that little green icon will move across as we step through time. All right, so the Disaster Mitigation Act was passed nationwide in 2000, and that resulted in the town's first time having a hazard mitigation plan. So it was about 2007, 2008 that it was developed. And this is updated every 5 years. But that first edition that the town participated in, I remember walking around with Laura Pooley, who's retired from town engineering. We were down on Fairfield Beach Road talking about elevating houses and elevating roads back 20 years ago. And so those kinds of concepts they've continued to be in this plan, and it's updated every 5 years. So even though it's the view on the right-hand side is the current edition, it's a 20-year-old planning document. So what happened a few years after that first hazard mitigation plan? There were the back-to-back years of storms Irene and Sandy, and we try to find a silver lining in things as humans. And the only thing I can say about Sandy is that it gave us a lot of resources to do a lot of work. And some of that work led to projects, and some of it hasn't yet. But we were sort of flush with grants after Superstorm Sandy. This picture on the right-hand side, there's not that many photographs in here that I personally took, but I always think about this. I stood down there with town staff, and they said this is one of the areas where the surge just sort of rushed through everyone's individual private concrete structures. And that image kind of always sticks with me. I don't know how I found it for this presentation, but was happy to find it. You can see in the past when this is constructed, somebody probably put flashboards in it. It's kind of a groove in place. All right, so after storms Irene and Sandy, the town really in vain started doing a lot of planning. So you've probably seen this map on the right-hand side, the map of all the different segments that could be laid out for flood protection. I think 2013-14 was when this plan was first worked on by the board that preceded the FIRB. And in 2015, there was a report to the first Board of Selectmen, and many different things were outlined in this report. I would hesitate to say that they were all recommended, but they were all identified as things that could be picked up and studied going forward. So this plan is kind of the precursor to the plan that we're talking about tonight, I would say, in some ways. I put this up here really just because it's important to acknowledge the things that we did that didn't work out the way that we thought that they would. And that happens sometimes in planning, but some of that early work after Hurricane Sandy was related to the beaches that you have and the facilities that you have. And I think that this is a lesson in going forward. How do we plan for our critical facilities and our historic and cultural resources and things that are important to us? So it's a good example of trying to do that. So there were some other studies that were done. The Army Corps of Engineers has always kind of been out there in the background studying coastal towns nationwide and trying to find ways to reduce flood losses. But they were involved heavily with Pine Creek. And so maybe you've seen this report in the past. Again, we're just going to kind of fly through these. There's been some work done on historic and cultural resources, which I think is pretty interesting because we don't oftentimes think about how hard it is to adapt historic structures. We can't just flood-proof them or move them. We need to find ways to make them flood resilient. So some of the Hurricane Sandy money was used for historic and cultural resources. And some of it was used.
Like that slide for a second.
Yeah.
And maybe on some of these other slides. SFHA.
Yes, I should have defined that. So that's Special Flood Hazard Area. It's a FEMA term. So that's the FEMA floodplain.
SLR scenario.
Sea level rise.
Sorry?
Sea level rise?
Sea level.
Right. Is that on this slide? Oh, it is. Yep.
If you wouldn't mind doing that.
Yeah. I'm going to add those to the definitions in the front as well going forward. Thank you. So shifting away from those kinds of studies, this one was kind of attempted to be more comprehensive. This was looking at the part of the storm surge that came from Ash Creek. And so it acknowledges right off the bat, this study acknowledged that it wasn't solving flooding from other parts of the shoreline, but it was looking at that part of the storm surge that came in from Ash Creek, which of course is the lower part of the Rooster River. So these are some concepts that were developed. There was going to maybe be some cost estimates for a berm along the side of the Marina Basin and up Turney Road or out Riverside Drive. This is the so-called 10-town plan. So the regional framework for coastal resilience. This one was about nature-based solutions. So this one was not about reducing flooding. This one was more geared towards reducing erosion. That said, the concept that was prepared for Fairfield was a dune ridge concept for south of Penfield. So a dune ridge that could maybe reduce some of the frequent storm damage, but wouldn't stop a Hurricane Sandy necessarily. So you can see the green icon is kind of staying in place. A lot of Hurricane Sandy planning funding was kind of used in 2015, 2016, 2017. So the town also looked at its beaches, and there was some discussion about how to design engineered beaches because I won't get into the details, but if you've got an engineered beach design, you're eligible for some kinds of funding going forward. So there was a plan put in place for Jennings, for Penfield, et cetera. Downtown, right? So green infrastructure was something that was identified as a potential way to reduce flooding in the downtown area where it's stormwater related. So the conveyance of stormwater under Route 1 into the south is limited and probably always will be for reasons that are too numerous to go into right now. But green infrastructure is a way that stormwater runoff could be reduced. So this is another one of the plans that was put in place after Hurricane Sandy using those funds. That's just a drawing that we put together to show what that would look like. So this is obviously not constructed, but what it would look like if somebody were to do that. South Benson pumping station. So this is a project that would remove hurricane surge waters that collect kind of north of Jennings Beach, northwest. It's the design at this point is for about 2 feet of water, 2 feet depth within 24 hours of the flood event. And the cost estimate, you can see this is something that would be very costly to implement. I said a few minutes ago, Army Corps is always there in the background doing its thing, slowly, quietly. They also developed a study called Fairfield and New Haven County's Coastal Storm Risk Management Study. They also like to use a lot of words. So this is just an image from that study. I think, Becky, this is the one that you cited before we started, the cost, 500 million, if everything were to be done to provide comprehensive protection. But think back to that image from the 2013, 2015 master plan. So we're kind of looking at all those segments, right? All the different segments that were laid out and they were studied individually. And so it's time to put that all together. But then what happened? We had a good reminder about other kinds of flooding. So September 2018, the riverine floods. So Horse Tavern Brook came roaring down and Rooster River flooded its floodplain. And there weren't just flood losses. There were, I think, a lot of erosion losses from that flood as well. There were some foundations that were close to the river. I think that's what I recall hearing. So 7 inches of rain upstream of you and just incredible damage. Not just in Fairfield, but significantly in Fairfield. So then that, that led to planning that was related to riverine flooding, which I think was appropriate. So some of the early detention designs came about in the years following. This is just an image for where some of those could be located. The idea would be if you're detaining or retaining water upstream, offline from the river, then there's less that needs to be conveyed during a flood. Here's an image from one of the reports, so-called phase 3. So this is kind of the mid to low section of Rooster River. This was also kind of an update of the 2006 report. So there was an updated flood modeling and cost estimates. Concluded that previous recommendations, some of them were not going to be cost effective, but it found that some things still would be. So again, this is something to be swept up into this master plan, right? So this report was done, but now where does it go next? That's been a lot about planning, and we're not quite done with the plans, but I thought it'd be good to talk about some successes interspersed in those. So the project that protects where we are right now, the flood protection system around us. These are some photographs. This is a photograph from a tour that the town was kind enough to host a few years ago on the upper right as well. That's why there's all those people standing there. But this is considered a success. This is something that would reduce flood damage to these facilities during a Hurricane Sandy-like event. The downtown green infrastructure plan didn't just sit on a shelf. The town has been trying to implement some ways to reduce stormwater flooding. So there's been some success with porous pavement, reducing imperviousness to the extent that it's possible. There also was, I'm sure that you've all seen this photograph. It was in the news a lot. Some underground detention near Sherman Green. So there's been some work to try to reduce that downtown flooding. There's also been some work done by others, Ash Creek Estuary, and looking at flood protection and living shorelines, which don't reduce flooding, but can help with erosion and shoreline change. Continue to have some people joining us. And again, sort of like the Army Corps, other entities have been looking at coastal flooding and trying to project how it will change over time. So the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, CIRCA, has done some modeling. Here's some images of that. And you've probably seen images like this before, and you're going to see a few more of them over the next few months as Weston and Sampson gets into the study. This is a town commissioned coastal modeling that was done by Ray's Coastal Engineers. So you'll also see some expansions of this and some other scenarios that will be based on this modeling that's kind of already been set up. This is a project that was about the underpasses. It's called Resilient Fairfield, and it's where we borrowed that word resilient for this master plan. This study, and you can see now the icon is all the way on the right-hand side. So we're sort of almost to the present day. This one, it was about the 4 most at-risk underpasses and looked at ways to reduce flooding, not so much the depth, but maybe the duration of flooding, and kind of just increase public safety. And there were some ideas for how to do that for each of the 4 underpasses. I think what was nice about this study is it had different ideas for each of the 4 main underpasses that it looked at. And then the plan of conservation and development, which has been underway for the past couple of years, has tried to take a really positive statement about flood resilience. And what I mean by positive statement is it recognizes parts of the towns that have to be protected. So downtown, areas near the train stations, these what we're calling resilient corridors, so roads that need to stay dry so that people can use them to get out, or emergency vehicles can use them to get to people that need to be helped during a flood. And so again, this plan of conservation development, it's not only a resilience plan, but there's a lot in there about flood resilience. And so the hope is that this master plan that's being worked on this year will be consistent with statements in the POCD. All right, so now what? Again, you probably saw something on the screen that you sat through and participated in the past. So this is the schedule that the town has outlined with its consultant, Weston and Sampson and Ray's Coastal Engineers, for this study. It's starting right now. You can see these tasks on the left-hand side are the tasks that the consultant has. Those are the words that they chose.
Starting in March of this year.
Starting in March.
You're starting in
A new set of studies.
October.
I know they're just starting a new set of studies after already spending millions on studies.
We can hear some of you guys. Do you know, are you trying to have your comment heard or not quite yet? It's fine either way. Just let me know. Let's hold. Right. So this master plan is the one that I'm showing starting in this winter. So there'll be the assessment of risks and vulnerabilities, which is not just going to be a rehash. It's going to be kind of a more forward-looking. And then everything we just looked at will be swept up into that. There'll be some making some visuals to communicate what the plan is trying to get at, what the risks are. That'll come in, May, June, July. There'll be some concept designs and some recommendations, some cost estimates. The whole thing should be wrapping up sometime, we're thinking December, January. I have January of 2026 on here as the tentative completion. So that's what'll be going on with the consultants. So here's the outcome, right? So here's our logo that I said we had to have, but we don't really have to have in the middle on a blank plan. So you're all gonna help fill this in, right? Maybe you feel like you helped with one in the past and you're tired of this, but this is the time this year. We're gonna make sure this plan, see this arrow points to the capital improvement plan. This actually isn't the real cover. You can find the cover of the capital improvement plan. This is the annual budget. And then that's the hazard mitigation plan that we looked at earlier. this has to feed into both. Things in here in the capital improvement plan can be funded with bonds and with other kinds of funding. Things in the hazard mitigation plan can be funded by FEMA and by the state. So these arrows are really important. Your homework. It's not that bad yet. So this meeting repeats next week, same content. Don't feel like you have to come again. You can, but it's going to be pretty much the same material. Provide your information. I think you already did that. If you signed in both sheets, one stays, one goes with us. And then as soon as I shut up, we're going to write stuff on the flip chart. But you've got to stay involved. So I'll go away. I'm not the consultant working on this master plan. So Weston and Sampson and Race will be back with public information meetings and workshops. They'll probably have maps. You'll have stickies and dots you'll put on maps. Maybe they'll do some interactive polling. I don't know. It's not been worked out yet, but you got to show up for that stuff. And then when the plan is a draft form towards the end of this year, take a look at it. So with that, I don't think we need any prompts to get going, but if the room was silent, I wanted some things to be on the screen.
So now it's your turn. You guys all have a chance to ask questions. What we'll probably do is repeat the questions up here
Leave them
so
up
they can
there.
get under the Zoom, just so we capture them. You also have a chance to write down your ideas. You've all got some stickies. If you have something you want this group to look at, Weston and Sampson to look at, tell us. This is our chance to put those ideas in front of the consultant. Can't promise we'll do them all because some of them may not be permittable. They may not make sense feasibly. It may be way too expensive, but we will look at them. And that's the whole point. Get the ideas in and we'll at least explore them. Tell us what you like about the projects that have already been started. If you're from the Rooster River, do you like what we're doing? Are there things you want us to look at?
You know what I mean? Like, we really haven't done anything at the Rooster River.
Oh, but there are things that are in process that have
Well,
been
I think
basic.
we have to get facts right on certain things with the Rooster River. I mean, I think that's one of the things I wrote down. We've had 4 floods. We should be factual about that.
18, 21.
2007, 2015, 2018, and 2021.
Yeah.
So it's 4 floods, and each time it's higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
So in our houses. So I think that we have to be factual about that and not be like,
Yeah.
it's only like this one time. I mean, we have, obviously, our town, we love our beaches. So we know that the coastline is very, very important to us, and the hurricanes do affect us in that way. But the Rooster River has had 4 floods every time, going up higher and higher. And I think not only with the Rooster River, but anywhere, a fatality hasn't happened yet, but it's going to. People get rescued on our block from the fire department because they don't even see the water and they're driving into it. You don't want to see
And we're
that.
really good at forecasting hurricanes. We see them coming days
Right,
ahead, but
these
we're
are
not.
These are very
Right.
These are.
It's such a flashy
different things.
situation.
I'm glad that you had some of it, but I think we need to be factual about it.
Yeah.
In that sense that it's an increase every single time that,
And it's
Yeah.
going to get
and it's
worse.
3 feet.
From what we're hearing, it's going to get worse.
Yes, it is, but we haven't had a fatality, but we're just lucky.
Well, 38, we did have fatalities and 38 hurricanes. So I mean, you're right. And
I mean, we're just lucky because what happened downtown under the underpass happens on Blue Island Drive. You know what I mean? That there's a car stuck and people have to call the, the fire department to come and. Let's figure it out. We're at Blue Island Drive. Okay. Yep. And I think, I was saying too, the topography of where we live in Stratfield Village, you have hills on both sides and we're at the bottom of the hill. So when
Yeah.
it's water, there's nowhere else to go. So I think we have to be factual about things.
And I think, let's also be realistic in a sense that the floodwaters start above us.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
parking lot and,
Yeah,
and
first selectmen have come in toward our lot.
yeah.
They've come into our garages,
Yeah.
they've done all that. They know it's from Trumbull,
Yeah.
the wall and everything, but That's why the flood basins, I think, on our side of town, those permanent basins that you're saying.
The dependent basis for us. That's gonna help a lot, but I also want to be honest that that's not gonna be 100%. It's not gonna stop the flood, and we all.
No, but I think,
But we can do little things.
We can do little
River
things.
out.
I mean, because that was, that's, we do a lot of studying, obviously, because we do a whole history of studying. But I do think that, from one of the studies, that was what was,
It can absorb, it can hold a lot of water.
yeah, in key locations, because we all know we don't want it just to be our neighborhood and then we give the water to some other neighborhood. So we understand that. So Fairchild Wheeler Golf Course is above us. That makes sense. And then elevation, I forgot to get. Tunstall, yeah. So to me, if we have a budget, like that is like, I think the most important part for,
And I think, part of what, we need everyone to recognize is that, we've been trying to do that for a while now, and permitting takes a long time, and what 3 years? What's held that up for permitting? But that's
but do we
not.
have the money?
Yeah,
We have the money, we just don't have the permits, is that what?
Well, we actually, I believe, Bill Hurley is on the phone and he might be able to answer it, but I believe Army Corps has actually given its approval. Bill, are you?
Yeah, I am. I have another meeting. That's why I couldn't attend in person here. But yeah, just a little bit of well, good news is that the Army Corps has, I guess,
Well repeated.
completed their review, and they are about to do a project authorization. So
Wait, hold a
Any-
second. The Army Corps has done their review and they're about to do what's called a project authorization.
right.
Go ahead, Bill.
Another bit of good news is that in the permit structure, and this is for the Tungus Hill detention area and the two at Fairchild Wheeler, they were looking at, believe it or not, $1 million in fees, and they have substantially reduced that by 80%. And so therefore that will give us, more money to do the project. So that was really good news for us as well.
So the other thing he said was that they were looking at substantial fees for Tungus Hill and Fairchild Wheeler, and they've substantially reduced that by 80%, which is good news because now we have more money to actually do the project.
Right. So, as I said, this literally, when they say, breaking news, that was actually today at like 2:00. So
We just got this today at 2.
Yeah, but that is good news there. The other is we anticipate to put out what we call an RFP, where we'll have a surveyor survey the existing conditions at Rooster River in between routes 59 and Route 1, which is
Wait a minute, I'm just gonna
on.
repeat. Wait, Bill, I'm gonna repeat that. So we're about to put out an RFP where a surveyor will look at the existing conditions between Route 59 and, what was the other route?
Route 1, yeah.
Route 1.
Yep. And so on that there, then they'll measure out what the elevations of the river, the bottom of the river are today. And we can compare that to when the dike system in the river was in the 60s. And so if it means that we can reduce the sediment by, say, 1 foot or 2 foot, assuming that the bottom of the river to the top of the dike is 10 feet. If we're able to excavate 2 feet, that would be basically a 20% conveyance increase, which would help reduce flooding as well. So again, these may not.
So the other thing we'll be
solve the
doing
problem.
is we'll be looking at the elevation of the river versus what it was historically, and we might be able to excavate 1 to 2 feet, which would also help a lot from a flooding
I
standpoint.
think you said this is downstream of the Merritt, right? Is that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's Route 1 and 59, so yeah.
Oh,
So it is below the Merritt.
Oh, yeah, this
So
is.
thank
way
you for
below.
the
This is
update.
Yeah, this is the lower part, more like if the people know Lynbrook Avenue area, that's the area that we're looking and hoping to excavate that extra sediment.
So Bill, the RFP would go out within the next month or so, roughly?
Yeah, 4 to 6 weeks, correct.
4 to 6 weeks for the RFP, and then we would get the bids in, and then we could start doing this work.
Right, and we would use some of the grant money
What
that
do you
we
mean? How long
have.
will it take?
Right before we move on.
We're talking about the surveying here.
Yeah, this
I think what he's so there's a question on the table about the time frame, but I think what he's really asking is the detention basin time frame as well as this survey time frame and looking at the elevation of the river bottom. Do you have a good,
Well,
sense of when might those kinds of things happen? Is that a year out? Is that 2 years out?
Well, for the detention ponds, it most likely, we're hoping that, now with the Army Corps giving their permits, we just have to do the final, plans. We put them out to bid. We're trying to, and this is just, as I said, initial goal, and it's not set in stone, but maybe to do, summer construction for the Tungus Hill, detention
Summer
area.
construction, maybe for Tungus Hill?
And then because it would greatly affect the golf course, and we're working with the city of Bridgeport, who's also financially contributing some of the
Golf
money for
course
the
may be
project.
longer because it's the city of Bridgeport and they may want it to play maybe on the golf course.
Yeah,
So there
right,
may be-
exactly. So we probably would have to wait till late fall to start
That
that.
might be late fall. And these
Yeah.
are, let me just be very clear. These are
Right.
ballparks because there's a whole process in doing these projects. You have to get the RFP out, you have to finish up the final permit things, then you have to get the bids back and, so I'm giving you these timeframes as our best estimate at this point.
Are we
but-
not considering Owen Fish anymore for the retention basin?
So this is Tungus Hill. Are we doing Owen Fish as well?
Owen Fish right now is still in design phase. It is going very slow, but of all the measures that we've looked at, flooding the field or putting under ground detention, unfortunately, the water table is only about 18 inches below the field, and so there's very minimal impact if we were to do the underground detention. We are looking at some other measures. We at least recently excavated our sediment bay, which would at
Wait,
least
Bill,
prevent.
Bill, can
Oh,
I just
sorry, yeah,
put you?
I forget, yep.
Can I put you, so Owen Fish is in design phase, so it's further back than these, and what he's saying is that the water table there is actually only 18 inches below, so that the amount of water it can hold is not going to be as much. It doesn't mean we're not going to go forward, but it is probably the next phase of what we would look at in this area.
And then three more detention ponds.
Well, we looked at 7 altogether. I think we
Seven,
prioritize, well, we're prioritizing the ones that are gonna hold the most water, which makes the most sense, because that's what you want to do, right? As we spend the money, we want to do the things that have the biggest impact for the town. So the 2 that have been prioritized, I think are Texas and Fairchild Wheeler, and then Owen Fish will be coming after that. And I don't know when the other 3, if they're doing it, because there's other things we're doing in Bristol River too. We want to be able to clean the river from the debris so that you can have water flow. I mean, there's other things that they're
Let
looking
me
at.
ask Bill a question. Hey, Bill, this is David. So
Sure,
is it,
David.
what's the best way to get this information out sort of in a uniform manner? Where people can hear you, or you could put it on a fact sheet or something. Is there a way to do that?
For today, probably not, but if
Right,
we,
not this moment, but after,
Yeah.
so in the next couple days.
hopefully I can at least put something together if anybody wanted to listen, and these are being recorded, correct? So for the 27th, I should be able to at least put something together to start, some of the discussions, or at least give people an update.
Okay.
My anticipation is that there'll also be public meetings on these projects one last time, as we finalize the design, based on permit comments, and go from there. So there definitely is going to be some more communication and updates coming.
Okay, I'm gonna steal back control and so
Sure,
that
no
folks in the
problem.
room can hear. But thank you. So, but I did just lie to everybody because I told them the meeting on March 1st would be the same as this one. But I think what you're suggesting is you might have some more information before then. I guess just tell me yes or no.
Well, no, I'll have it for that meeting. How's that?
Okay.
Is it March, it's the Saturday meeting. That's all I remember.
Yep, yep.
So I
right.
forgot the date.
So while that may be the case, now that meeting won't be the same as this one.
Well, it'll be this presentation,
Right.
but we will actually have some.
But I think that information needs to also not be only at the meeting because people might not.
Well, so flood
Sure.
erosion control has a newsletter. Those of you who signed up in the back, if you are open to it, we would be happy to put you on that newsletter. We will put this information on that newsletter for you. So you guys can get whatever we get, we will send to you guys, and we can absolutely get that. So if you signed in the back, we have your email. And if you don't want to get the newsletter, raise your hand now, or put a little check next to your name when you leave. Because I know not everyone wants to have their emails flooded with, you know, stuff. This one seems like something you might want,
Oh, I
so.
didn't believe that.
You know, that was a.
Well done.
But
Are the newsletters posted on the firm's website?
we haven't figured out how to do that. I guess I could give them to Dave Kelly.
Oh, I can help you post them.
Yeah, 'cause we send them out, to everyone. We don't have our feed mailing list yet, but we're trying to build it. So I would be happy to get it to you today. And if I could just say, for anyone who is on the Zoom, could you put your email into the chat? And then we will put you on the newsletter as well.
Yeah, it looks like there's about a half a dozen people online, Becky, if you can't. see
Okay,
it.
thanks, Bill.
All right, other comments? Let's, want everyone to have a chance. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for doing this. So one of the slides, I think I saw there was a cost estimate of 530 million with a cost share of 191. Is that about right?
547, but yes.
Okay. So at this moment, with a lot of uncertainty, is there any concern about funding?
Well, let me be honest about what that was. That was 2022 costs. The Army Corps did that, and they did a plan that basically was shoreline only protection. So it didn't even look at riverine. It didn't look at downtown, didn't look at underpass. And they also did a plan that I don't think we as a town ever would have accepted, because they built it to the, I think it was the 500-year storm, which means there was some 8-foot walls.
17 or so elevation.
There were 8-foot walls down at the beach, and it's, I think we have to be realistic about what is it we want this plan to be. We don't want our town to look, you know, to have big steel walls down by our beach. So realistically, we're gonna be looking at things that make sense, but probably won't protect us from 100% of the flooding. And I think that's a realistic trade-off that we're all gonna wanna do because it's our taxpayer dollars. So I don't think the funding will be anywhere near that.
But
Now, can I give you any sense? Not now, but at the end of this, I should be able to give you a sense. What we're getting out of this is what they call, level 5 costs, which means it is a 10% design, which means it can be up or down by a range, but not a huge, I mean, we'll get a ballpark.
any concern though about that federal funding, grants?
I'm very concerned about that. I'm hearing FEMA maybe going away, and a lot of our disaster relief funding came from FEMA. I mean, that is a potential issue. And it's one of.
Yeah, excuse me, Becky?
We might have to do more bonding. Not ideal, but that's what we, as taxpayers and as the, you know, administration and frankly the town board, all of this will go to the town board as recommendation, and we'll decide what makes sense and what priority. We may only be part of it now and do it, maybe in 1 year. But we'll do what makes sense for the town and for our taxpayers. So what are other questions or comments or ideas that you want us to look at?
I was thinking about, you said maybe cleaning up and dredging rivers and things like that. I'd like to hear more about that if possible.
Yeah, so Bill was mentioning that he was gonna have surveyors go out and look at the, if I understood it correctly, the sediment level of the bottom of the river, and if you can go back and look at what it was maybe historically, and if we got more now, we may be able to take some back out. So that will be one of the things we'll be looking at, which would then obviously give more water into the riverbed. Take them out.
And I wouldn't think that's bad as costly, structurally built, just, I mean, I don't know about that.
I'll be honest, I am not a good prospect expert to ask these questions, but
I'm just saying,
I would talk
the
about it.
river, like, you know, maybe.
I think it's,
I can tell you the Pine Creek dredging is gonna be about $1 million.
it's cheaper, but the thing is it's less cost effective because the benefit is it's for this other things. So sometimes if you remove sediment, water surface, the elevation of the flood, things should go there. It's not really easy. So it's whether it's cost effective, but that's something that will be looked at in this plan. I think that's fun.
I did have, oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah.
did have a question. You referenced the 500-year storm, and yet many of the things are discussed in terms of Sandy. It was actually a tropical storm, wasn't it, hurricane? But so to give what a 500-year storm is, would that be like the 1938?
That's the general
That's-
consensus, yeah, but it's closer to that.
Cat three. Which was a cat three.
That would
Right.
happen.
Yeah, I mean, so there's more information that anybody wants to dive down, but if you look at how that 500 years defined, all the water level records for all time are plotted. And then the worst storm is typically about that, and that's the worst storm, so.
That that's in recorded.
Right, that water levels are recorded for. So it's just statistics. So it's not perfect, but that would be about. I could be calculating.
But let me also share a perspective that they run the cohort has, which is that it is not a good use of taxpayer dollars to protect that big of a storm. That would be a coastal storm issue. It would be something where frankly, you know, to do that level of protection would not be something we would want to see in our neighborhood. Those would be the 8-foot walls, the 6-foot walls. I think we need to recognize that there is a level we can protect, and maybe it's to a slightly lower protection level, which means that we wouldn't get some of the nor'easters and some of the smaller storms, but frankly, if we get a cat 3 storm, it's gonna come across. And I think we just need to acknowledge that, or we need to decide we're gonna spend $547 million, if I don't think we want to. So I think these are the trade-offs that we're gonna have to make as a town. And I think we should just acknowledge that, and that's why I want you all here, because I want people all to hear that. A lot of people in the floodplain in the coastal area are raising their houses, which is right now what FEMA recommends. To at least, the water will go out, and it'll go under, and it'll come back out again.
Question over here.
But
You have a question over here.
Yes, I know there's been some studies and some storm sewer and sewage mitigation in the past of problem areas. But what about the overall infrastructure? A lot of this stuff was built back in the 50s and 60s and maybe even earlier. And is it actually with all of these housing projects that are going out that we're being forced to undertake? The adds a lot of load to an relatively old system. And do we actually have,
so the wastewater treatment plant is a whole separate budget, and they are putting.
and storm sewer though, does that go to wastewater as well?
No, storm sewer is a different, we have
Yes.
2 separate,
Okay,
for that. And we
Okay.
are looking to increase some of the pipe sizes, but you're right, it's one of the things we should probably evaluate. Could be a storm water system is that, but I mean, there's a lot of I&I infiltration that actually goes into the wastewater treatment plant too, because our.
well, yeah, when the whole thing's flooded,
Yeah.
it floods the sewer system too.
I think you're right, because one of the studies that we did see over at the Stratfield Village was that the storm drains were not big enough in our area. It's like when Woodville Village, they just kind of did a jogging out and just stuck it on, and it's like all the development was not enough.
Well, I think, I think,
We had the manhole covers blow right off.
Bill, we put a
Right.
$500,000 in each year for stormwater improvements, right?
No, not necessarily. We have it in a group of like every 3 or 4 years. And so, we currently have some neighborhood storm systems, in the, 2025, budget that will probably carry for the whole, calendar year, 2025. And, we may be looking at, additional $500,000 for either, fiscal year 26 or 27. We're working with the capital planning group and finance to decide what year to go for that.
Okay,
So what he said was that there are small amounts in each of the capital years. There's some in 2025, there's some in 2026. He's working with the capital group to figure that out, but there's not a whole scale immediate replacement, but there is an acknowledgement that there are small pipes that we do need to address.
Thought about putting a sump pump on each railroad bridge at South Benson, and pumping it north over the berm into the gully between the railroad tracks in 95.
I don't know, that's an idea though.
You got a perfect retention pond there, and a sump pump wouldn't be a big deal to put in the road.
So which one, like where?
South Benson,
Benson?
or North Benson, north side of the post road, right underneath the bridge. There's like a sump pumping a house would be activated by the water, so as soon as it starts to fill up with pump, then pump it, when you go underneath the bridge, there's a high earthen berm to your right, and then you've got the high ground at 95 on the entrance, and the high ground at the railroad tracks, and it goes all the way down to behind Stop and Shop. That holds an awful lot of water.
I don't think that's really done. I think that's already town, I think that's already part of the drainage system.
It doesn't show up to be in front of it, it does have the North Benson. Which is probably the biggest congestion underpass.
I don't think they looked at that, I mean, that's that. So this is what we want, is ideas like this, we will bring these back to our consultants, and we will evaluate these.
And then there was one thing, and then here's one other, I put all those together, but they're all related.
Cause so this goes with this, or no?
No,
Oh, all right, elaborate.
that goes with the marina area.
Oh, okay. You want to say anything?
You want to say them
Sure.
so people hear
You raise the berm at the entrance to Jennings Beach to the height of the dune. And then continue an earthen berm along the parking lot. All the way to where the north parking lot is. And you raise the hump that you drive over, you get into the parking lot for the boats. To the height of the north parking lot.
Yeah,
it. The Riverside Drive study is exactly that, and I
Yeah.
think that's a really good
Well,
idea.
and then at Riverside Drive, you've got a berm that runs from Riverside Drive to the open spaces.
Yeah.
And you raise that with elevation 12.
I think that's a really good idea, and that was actually one of
And
the.
all the marshes behind there, it can be blocked off, are all fed by self-regulated tide gates.
right.
Yeah.
And that was,
So that was a study we looked
Yeah.
at, we looked at actually several different heights, we looked at an 18-foot height.
Ooh.
18-foot height.
Mhm. This one. Yeah, it was this one.
Yeah, but it's a really great idea, and it's actually, I think, one of the things we should be.
But it was looked at one point by a consultant, and he said, well, you couldn't have the entrance be where it is, you gotta come in a different way, which didn't make any
I
sense.
think it was me, actually.
Okay,
But that's okay.
I was gonna have it at the time.
Yes,
And then I got.
he was at the firm that did this study.
And then I got another. And this pertains to Jennings Beach, which is a big part of my.
Right.
Build an earthen berm between the Durrell Pavilion and Ricketts Beach. From an elevation of 11 or 12 along the sidewalk. And you can build the road up at the end of, Penfield there, so that would be slightly elevated to reduce the need to drive over a steepened berm, but you drive over this berm to make it 100% passive to retain the water that's going to come underneath the new pavilion at elevation 8. You dropped it from 12 to 8. Sandy was a still water 10.5. So if you get it to 12, and I'm saying earthen berms in all these places, but it's absolutely the cheapest thing you can do. And it should do the job, because you're in an AE zone, you don't need to go through all the hassles of permitting for a B zone. And you gotta understand, are you trying to protect the pavilion or the homes behind there?
The hose behind.
The homes behind should be your concern, not the pavilion.
So question, do you still need self-fencing pumping station? If you already don't.
Yes, because we're gonna have so.
That's taking the water out, I'm trying to keep them coming in.
Right, so, but think about that too. You then have water collecting from, if you have severe rain at the same time.
Well, that berm along Penfield doesn't stop the water from going out.
And it also doesn't stop the water from coming in through some of the pentways, through the fire training area, through some of the Ash Creek.
Your big Pentway, it doesn't come through the one next to the Durrell Pavilion, but it does do Roller Road, and that can be easily fixed.
I agree with you. And that's one of the things we'll be looking at. in this
Very
study,
easy to
is how do
fix.
we fix all those little, small things, and some of those can be temporary avoidable things.
Okay. That Rolling Road, you've got the place to slide the rear boards in it.
Yeah.
It's that, unfortunately, it's a lower elevation than the bulkhead on either side.
Your handwriting is very neat, thank you.
other people who have ideas that you want us to look at? And again, don't feel like this is the only time. The idea is that we want you guys to feel like you're helping us do this, that we're.
I'm wondering if the retention ponds that they're already doing, they're basically in parks and so on and so forth. What if we had berms in the parks as well to keep the water in the park instead of flooding the whole area? If the retention ponds weren't enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on riparian flooding, but one of the things I'd like to look at too is riparian buffers or things that maybe would be small things that people could do on their own property if they're near the river. And I know, you know, that you may not want a big berm, but that might be another thing that individual homeowners could look at.
The one thing to be really careful of, so I'm the town's floodplain floodplain administrator, is we have very specific rules and requirements from the National Flood Insurance Program. So we have to make sure that whatever we do, we are at minimum providing equal conveyance and compensatory storage within that riverine channel. So if we berm something, it really can't be within the floodplain that we berm it without providing something that offsets, you know, because when you think about a riverine channel, it's defined. And so if you add blockages within that channel, you're diverting that floodwater somewhere else and potentially impacting somebody else's property. And so that would all have to be studied to make sure that whatever, you know, if you burn something, that you're not inadvertently blasting out a different street, for example. So it's a like a coastal environment because it's kind of a drop in the bucket, really. But riverine, because it's so channelized, there's no other place for the water to go except if you draw it off like what they're trying to do with reducing some of the flooding impacts by adding more detention as opposed to kind of walling things. So you either, if you block, you either blast behind the blockage or it channels it down and blasts even further below the blockage.
Or it slows it so that you have time for the egress of the water. Figure out how to do it.
Well, that's what the retention basins are for.
Exactly.
You know, it's one thing to receive the water. If you slow the flow of the water, you're backing the water upstream. It's a very complex and dynamic situation.
We're not doing any dredging in Tungus Hill Park. I worry that there isn't enough retention for some of these storms to carry it all without having to open some sort of gate or it comes over the top because they don't want, as I understand it, not allowed to touch any of it, and the elevation of the park is only maybe about 3 feet above where they're calling this detention pond. And the only thing is making a berm around the park itself for any overflow. Might be an option.
We'll have to.
Maybe not, yeah, but we'll have to see.
I haven't heard that exactly, but we'll pass.
I don't even know if all of the water coming into Tungus Hill Park is being routed into that detention pond. I haven't heard an answer yet on that.
Yeah,
It's been about a year.
we keep emailing Bill, but it never quite gets.
So your question is, how many cubic yards of water can it hold in today, and could we?
Yeah,
can
on
we
the Greenfield Street side.
Could we fix that with a berm, maybe or not?
Yes, it's not very deep.
Okay, well, let's ask that question.
I think also too, we should look at different, like Fairchild Wheeler Golf Course is owned by, you know, if Bridgeport is involved and that's gonna slow it up, maybe we go to another location too. I mean, like, you have to look at them like.
Well, they evaluated it by based upon cubic yards. That
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would be helpful because it's above us, like, you know, we
everyone.
think that that's the higher point, which is where it's coming down from. But I mean, like, we'd have to rethink that too.
Well, what he said, I don't know if you heard, he said that Bridgeport owns it. And so we would probably not be able to do any actual work on that till the fall because of people playing. That Bridgeport probably wouldn't have it.
We owned it and they rented it from us.
I actually don't know that.
They own it.
Yeah, Bridgeport owned it. Okay.
Becky, I'm still here if there's some questions.
Above ground sewer main off behind North south of Kings Highway by the old Volkswagen dealer between the two cemeteries. It's above ground, it serves as a berm to prevent drainage of part of Rooster River. Are there any plans to look at that?
No?
Yeah.
Is that, car dealer that's out of business?
The empty
No Volkswagen
Yeah,
dealer.
yeah, is that what that is?
It's behind that.
Yeah,
You gotta walk out into the marsh area there. It's above ground sewer main for town. It stops all the water from draining in there.
is that one going to do business in that building, because they got bought it out?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, I would think so.
it's owned by Miller.
That's gonna be,
Still?
that's a brownfield as well. So they're gonna have to do some remediation on that one.
What's a problem?
It's.
That's at the car dealer, but this is behind the car dealer, south of that. In the north, where you've got your sewer main.
Yeah.
And part of the Rooster River. The sewer main slows up the drainage. It's above ground. You go down the road, look at one part, you know, that part up there, get out and walk out into the field here,
Yeah.
and you'll see the sewer main.
So what is the sewer main? What does that mean? Like, okay,
When you flush your toilet, it goes through that.
Oh,
And then it's treatment plant across the street, but your drainage water comes down and gets stopped by the pipe. And if you're slowing up the drainage, you're backing it up upstream, and you're getting flooded. The faster you get it out,
yeah.
the less you're gonna drain, you're gonna flood.
What about the people down the street? I mean, you're just flooding, you're just pushing the water down and.
Well, that's what Bridgeport did to us. They put up big concrete walls next to it.
I'm not, look, we can't, we're told what we can't blame, we gotta look at, like, where can we get the biggest bang for our buck? Where can we retain the most water? Is it the golf course? I mean, is it somewhere else? I mean, because if we have a big retaining area at the golf course, we can slow the flow of water, so as Keith said, as the flow of the water starts to subside, you need, instead of getting 3 feet of water, we're gonna have 3 inches or whatever. But the point is that we have to figure out ways that we can retain the most water and control an uncontrollable situation.
You need the downstream plugged up. You're gonna continue to flood it. The more you make the downstream, way faster, the less you're gonna have to pump upstream.
I agree with you. I agree, look, you're obviously much more knowledgeable about this than I am. No,
I spent a lot of years studying
No, I
this.
agree with you. What I'm saying is, if we're looking at this holistically, we can't screw the people downstream.
No,
No, I
I'm not
know,
trying to
I know
screw
you're
that.
not. I know you're not. What I'm saying is, if we can slow the water upstream and then have 6 or 7 places where we can slow the water up, maybe the problem is that maybe we put up the berms in certain places and we find ways that we can contain them and slow the flow so that people downstream are not.
I tried to separate my coastal things from my inland.
I just think it's multiple things.
Yeah.
Like, we have to look, should we be dredging the river if we can, should we be doing these things? Like, to your point, at the end, make sure that has,
The plaster goes out there, and that's it backs up.
and putting these, detention places in the right locations.
And the right sequence.
You all invest in down by BJ's there.
Like, why did they
Right.
buy that bill?
If we can hold some.
So Bill Avenue, I think, was another way to.
Downstream, it's gonna go slowing down there, then you're.
No, I think you have to do it along the way. I think it has to be a multi-step thing, but I think we have to, if we're getting at a 100-year storm or 500-year storm, we have to figure out ways, if we're getting 7 inches of rain from Trumbull, how do we slow that down? Because it can't be, we're gonna put a bubble over the town and that's it. And
Yeah, but we're gonna get the rain.
it's not, we're gonna get it, it's going to happen, that's where we're at, so what are the areas that we can contain the most water and look at downstream and.
I feel like this is part of the scope that's coming. It's.
Well, I think this is absolutely, I mean, we have a Rooster River plan. We have a couple pieces to it. I think we need to go to, part of the scope of what I'm hoping this consultant will do is, work with us to relook at those and look at, are there other things possibly that we need to be looking at?
You talked about a Brent, I think it was Brentwood. Right where the little roads cross the Fairfield Firestone. There's some dead roads that go down there that flood system. Rain about pumping them out. Why don't we do pump it?
I don't know that.
Yeah, was this on a slide? And we first
Yeah.
passed it?
You have to do it.
Okay.
So, the hard line will evaluate.
I think which study is tied to, call it now.
Free the throughway, we ran down and it kept going. The throughway's got to jam down.
One of the river studies, that's right. Yeah, okay. Shy
So-
people.
Anyone feel like they haven't been heard? But they want to say something yet?
Hi, Becky.
Somebody's on the computer, maybe asking for you.
I don't know if you can hear me.
I hear that, yeah.
Want to take this one on first or what?
Why don't we've got one here and then we'll be on the computer next.
All right, hold off 1 second. We're gonna do one in the room and then can you wait a minute?
Sure.
Okay.
Churchill was very active with people after things. Through the intervention of Governor Roy and when money was allocated residential properties and not just, but there are significant different failures in this area, focused on repetitive loss of property. The reason why FEMA is keen on adapting residential, repetitive loss of property. And they make up 1% of the enterprise policy now for 30% of the loss. That's from the GAO report. There are 2 grants that are currently even has been marketplace, because their annual grant and talking about individual flood mitigation projects. One is a new grant, it's the one for Connecticut, $20 million, and we have to get applications for it now. They play a big role in this. West Carnegie has breakthrough last. Mom's breakthrough,
Who did, sorry?
West Carnegie municipality.
Westcog, which is the 18 towns to the west.
People, this is the new FEA grant, and that has open now for application. Fairfield has over 200 repetitive loss property. Emergency management director is very familiar with this. This is the first time that the division of Homeland Emergency Management is very active in pushing out the marketplace. And but the grant period is only from May 5th.
So how do we go about getting people to apply for land? Where do we go?
Okay.
Getting the information to?
Okay, well, the first person to talk to is your emergency management. Right.
Well, so Emmeline, is this not your role in the town? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
That, obviously, after Sandy processed a lot of, grant funds to elevate homes. I think we did like 42 elevation projects. The process has changed a little bit. I think it, back then, and Becky knows this because she was a grant recipient, homeowners largely controlled the consultants. I think the process now is the town would have to decide to do this, do RFPs to hire consultants to do all the work, and they would control the project. We had a difficult time with the Sandy grants because homeowners, while a contractor was there, would say, "I'll do this at the same time." It is a nightmare to process those grants and separate the receipts. with the scope that's approved and then what homeowners want to do at the same time. So it was very challenging. I've actually had a couple of homeowners call because he's absolutely correct. The grant application cycles are open. But this has to be a conversation with, I think, the first selectman's office. We don't have a grant writer right now. We had one that was hired who went back to their prior job, so we don't have a grant writer right now. I have to tell you, in plan and zoning, we are the floodplain administrator's office, but we are so swamped with other projects right now, we do not have capacity to do grant applications. So this is really a resource question for the town as to whether or not they want to process them, whether they understand the dynamics of the town, who's gonna front the money first, right? So with the elevation projects, the homeowners paid for the projects first, and then they were reimbursed by FEMA in portions.
Can the homeowners just apply for the grant?
No. You have to go through, the town is actually, so depending on which fund pool it is, the state is the sub-grantee, and then the town's a sub-grantee of that. And then the applicant has a contract, the homeowner has a contract with the town. So really, the town is the applicant in these kinds of scenarios. So you can't bypass the town.
It sounds like we get the ability of the resources, because then you get the grant now, we'll have a much bigger problem later when they're voting.
Potentially, but keep in mind too that, you know, it's, we can apply for these now.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't have approval for 18 months. So it's great in this period where we haven't had a disaster. After Sandy, it was a little frightening because people still weren't back in their homes and there was a lot of delay. So it's not a great post-disaster program. It's a great pre-disaster program if, you know, you're in your home, you're safe, you're not displaced.
So that's right now.
So that's
So
right
we're
now.
right now.
So
We
it's,
have a bureaucratic problem.
well, I mean, I think we have to decide who's gonna process this on the town side, because to be honest, it's a lot of financial stuff, and we have project managers on the team now, but it's really a capacity issue. We have 4 project managers now who are busy processing projects, you know, larger infrastructure projects for the town. So it's just a matter of what's the interest, how many people, who's gonna process it? Do these homeowners understand that they need to front the money first, if that's the contract that's, so I think there's some legal things to work through in terms of, you know, how does it all get done? What are the state's requirements now? Because I think, to be honest, the state, FEMA Region 1 and the town, we've learned a lot. We made a lot of mistakes on all sides in doing these grants then. And I think there's probably different
Well,
procedures.
there's in talking to more truthful kind of folks, post Sandy experience with HMGP grants. What was that? HMGP, I'm sorry, that was it.
It was,
It's one of the FEMA grants,
yeah.
But if, you know, the residual aspect of that experience turned all those towns off within. And.
They were not fun.
Today, started to get, more, as we dissected language, so because, in West Side, in town, is because once we identified a homeowner, the town was out of the picture, the total team time to actually submit the application. The consultant is Dewberry and Dave, focus on the applicant, on the homeowner, and carry them all the way through. Didn't have any involvement from town personnel, and they filed an application and had 8 of them select elevations and Darien, Stanford, Westport, acquisition, and they would Scobie, Westport. So we have 20 million available to our town.
Well, no, but that SWIFT current grant is for acquisitions and floodproofing of non-residential. That's my understanding.
We have 22 headed block. Oh, yeah, it's over 200. In Fairfield. Yeah. And, but, you know,
The threshold is no different from any other municipality in Connecticut, in that the church, there are 3,400 repaired lost properties. And, the state has been dormant until, West Side and, got active last year. And, right now, we're doing is we're having outreach meetings, for repaired lost properties, and, what the board does is to identify them and get the consultant working on them.
So-
Do-
I have a question. Can we tap into Metro for resources? It sounds like right now we're in a massive crunch from a resource standpoint.
Right.
Because
We definitely are.
stuff and, I hear you.
Yes, so.
And everyone does have some grant writing facilities.
So when you process these grants, I mean, here's the rub. There is an administrative fee that you can charge, like, kind of bill back to FEMA when they give you this grant, and I think it's like a 5% amount. But there's probably, again, somebody's got to prepare all the applications, work with the homeowners, do all of that, and then if you only get if you paid the consultant to process 10 grants on the front end, you only get 8 awarded, the program doesn't really cover itself. So again, that's where it's, the board of selectmen would have to make a choice. They might have to go to the RTM because there might be a cost associated with facilitating that if we don't have capacity with our current staff. Is what I'm saying. So we could go the consultant route, sure, and have consultant do those.
I think that there's nothing that we would get.
It just depends what else is in the pool. I mean, if they have $20 million and it's competitive with other infrastructure projects.
Really,
For residential, okay.
and the other aspect of what's changed the last 10 years is the ability to outsource most of one equipment, which can take the burden off the town. But
But that would have to be, again, like, probably with our public sector, with our town administration, that's a conversation that.
well, do
I'd like to actually sort of park this, because I feel like this is not actually part of the flood.
Well, I was about to say, it can be something in there. Yeah.
I'm not sure who these things are back. This is something that maybe, Scott, would you want to take this to Bill and just see?
I'm going to take it to Bill.
Okay, so
Because
Bill,
I just
put this
did the
here.
math of what happens if the value of my home, which is one of the ones that's been hit before, does not have to, or does not get appraised at the current market value, and is half of that, and how much revenue the town just lost. If you did that, if you swept that over a few homes,
Yeah.
and 20 million goes away really quickly for the town, so it's definitely something that needs to get in.
So let's mark this. I'm gonna give Scott the action item on this one.
I would, and whether it's sure, if it's the.
Becky, do you remember who it was? I think we lost anybody there that had a question? We're in a Zoom meeting. Was it Jessica?
Yes, sorry, I just switched switched devices because
No
one was
problem.
dying.
I'm gonna probably repeat your question back to the room so they can hear it. So go ahead.
Sure, and I apologize. I was hoping to be there in person, but one of my youngest child caught a fever this afternoon, so hopefully at the next one. My question, hopefully not too complex, is in relation to the Penfield Pavilion project. As a resident in the area, just to give some context, we last year had 2 floods from seemingly I could consider it a relatively mild nor'easter, whereby our entire yard was completely under a foot of water from the Long Island Sound run over through the pavilion. And this we confirmed was something we had fish in our pool. It was a whole project to, and we actually had a few neighbors as well who had a similar situation. And we confirmed with prior homeowners that they did not have any flooding from Long Island Sound. So it does seem related to the project itself, which is coming to a conclusion, I believe, as I can see. But my question is in regards to restoring the sand that was naturally in place in and around the pavilion. And as I see it, there's about 3 or 4 feet of sand that is no longer around the barrier of the pavilion. So that is kind of, it seems as though that was essentially our natural barrier. Because now it appears that it's almost shaped like a funnel where it would essentially run over, come through the pavilion, and then right down our street and again flood us as it did 2 times last year. So what is the plan to restore that sand that was taken away as part of the project?
1 second. So everyone in the room, I think, heard this. It was Penfield related. So the question is about flooding, landward of Penfield, and has the removal of sand changed the situation? And will that be looked at as part of the study? Did I characterize that right?
Yes.
That is part of the study, and that is absolutely one of the things we'll be looking at.
Okay.
So the question was, because you take them down to 8 feet, when you guys ignore Easter, it's now coming and flooding the houses on the other side. We're very aware of that, and that's absolutely something to do with that.
Okay, great. Appreciate that.
No, it's, yep.
I'll go last, or somebody else does.
To take my sump pump idea from North Benson. The power company wants to put on big poles along there. Why don't we go to, Beach Road where you're going to divide up there, put a sump pump there, put a 6-inch plastic pipe along next to the tracks in the same spot. And then when you get to the other end of town, you've got Mill Plain Road and South Pine Creek. You can then run along the track there, going west and dump it into, Mill River. There is currently a drainage pipe underneath all that, all plugged up. And they looked at it before, they said it's too expensive to try to dig it up or replace it or clean it out because it's always flat.
Yeah.
So put the whole thing above ground in plastic pipe along the tracks.
We can look at that.
I'm trying to think of things that are inexpensive and solve the problem.
These are episodic problems. Right, once every couple of years, we have this huge problem. And we're looking at permanent solutions, all of which I think are really helpful. But there are an intermittent problem that has rapidly deployable solutions. Right, has not been as much discussed, but I think should be. A lot of the research on this, we looked at places that have this problem for centuries. The Netherlands, river problems in Europe, for example, are moving towards rapidly deployable, non-permanent structures, which I'm gonna offer, which I know are a lot cheaper, like in terms of 1/10, and have a much less likely to have large regulatory problems. They probably are, because you never know until you start going to regulatory agency. But can be put in place in minutes and have the same, potentially could have the same mitigation as you will have with berms and other more permanent structures. So I think we ought to really be looking at that.
So we will absolutely be looking at temporary structures. I think just to make a point, the issue with temporary structures, I'm actually a big fan of temporary structures, as I speak, is that you need to have the people to deploy them in enough time. And when some of these rain bombs happen, you don't get hours, and we may not have DPW people standing around just waiting to deploy.
Street blocking the road.
But that doesn't mean we don't look at it.
So let
We
me,
need to look at it from a holistic standpoint and really understand implications of manpower as well as that, because I think in some places,
For my own home, so.
in some places that could make sense.
in terms of the rapidity of deployment, for example, the one that I have a presentation on, and I have no interest in financially or anything else. You're talking 600 meters an hour, put up by 2 people. So you're talking about large areas, but very simple to put up. The Navajo Indians in Arizona, Navajo Native Americans in Arizona, redirected the course of a river that was flooding their town in less than an hour.
But then you have to know that where it's gonna redirect for that person. So
Listen,
that's an-
I know there's a number of.
We will absolutely be looking at this.
Between themselves.
You have ideas for areas they will be pointing out to the consultant, right?
Yes.
Specific
Well,
areas.
that's an interesting question. Because it really requires identification of what I call torrent sources, right? Where does the water come from? And it may not be from where you think it is in a lot of places, right? Sometimes it's not coming from the rain locally, it's coming from the drainage that gets backed up and pops the manhole cover. The second is that it's 100% right. So it's about where the water gets slowed down. How do you slow the water? Not so much where it goes. You can't put it just into the river that floods distally to where you're doing them. But
So we will be looking at it.
fair.
All right, we're kind of, I mean, we can keep going if people have other ideas, but I think what I wanted to do was give people a chance to share their ideas. We will be having a series of public meetings as this process goes on. Hopefully, we will have more data for you. So good questions have been asked about timing. We'll try to get those answered for our next meeting or it sounds like we might be able to actually have some answers for the river by our March 1 meeting. But if you don't want to come to that, I'll put it in the newsletter if I've got your information.
And I just asked that if anybody is interested in the Rooster River, we have a database of about 100 people who are. That if you would like to get information about, it's called the Friends of the Rooster River, who want to tame the rooster. And if you would just come.
Let's make sure we have. Oh,
Can we capture anything that's in the chat and the Zoom before we close it down?
yeah, we can do that. It's mostly me saying we got your messages.
And give it to me and I will be happy to put you on that list.
Well, thank you all for coming. I hope to see you all as this project progresses. And I think collectively, we all want to make just to mitigate some of this worrying.
Amen.
I feel like